And welcome everyone. So thank you again for joining today. As I mentioned, my name's Catherine and I'm from the Healthy Workplaces program. And this is our Best Me in 45 Move More session. So it's all about how we can sort of be active, and we probably know that we should be active, but that's always sort of easier said than done sometimes. So we're going to dive into that and explore kind of how can we tackle some of those potential barriers. So just as a bit of background, like I mentioned, this is the Kenton Medway Healthy Workplaces program, and it's a workplace wellbeing award scheme that your organization is taking part in, which means they can access some of these employee webinars that we run, as well as some other support and training. So if you see our name, that's kind of what we do. And then really, I like to sort of keep my sessions relatively informal, but we do have quite a large group today. So if you're able to sort of keep yourself on mute for the sake of the recording audio, but please don't stop from asking questions. So my background, I had my bachelor's in exercise science. I worked for a number of years as a personal trainer and group fitness instructor, and then have sort of worked as a behavior change specialist as well for a number of years in both a one-to-one and a group environment. So if you do have any questions, or if you've ever wondered, is this true? I've heard this before about fitness, then do feel free to ask me. And then I've also just put in the chat, again, the satisfaction survey and the link to our other upcoming webinars. So if you do have any feedback, we'd really love to see that, and so we can constantly improve, and then hopefully welcome you at another session. So I know we've had a few responses in the chat already, which is great, which is our kind of opening question of why is it hard to get active? I know in the chat we've had a few responses of things like working from home and just having those back-to-back meetings. Kind of, it's hard to sort of squeeze in getting, having a sort of lunchtime walk, but other things were, I have long-term health condition like arthritis or knees, so I don't tend to go for longer walks. And working from home, back-to-back meetings seems to be a recurring theme for sure. And then we've got weather. Yeah, so we're delivering this session sort of in winter, and it's cold, it's wet, it's dreary. Makes that motivation a bit lower for sure to sort of get out and get moving. And then time, long COVID. Yeah, so there's lots of really sort of justifiable reasons why it is hard to be active. And hopefully what we're going to be doing today, while we're not going to maybe to be able to tackle every single thing in a 45-minute session, what I do want to equip you with is to, one, make you feel you have an increase in the knowledge of kind of why it is beneficial to be active, because there's a lot of barriers. So it's got to be worth our time and have some benefits if we are going to be active. So we'll explore those. We're going to also identify some of those potential barriers you've talked about and look at possible solutions, and really work as a group to sort of think of what's your own experience with physical activity. Is there something that's worked for you that you can share in the chat that might help someone else? And then we're going to look at how we can increase your confidence to implement some of these healthy lifestyle changes by looking at some goal setting examples and how you can really sort of set your goals up for success. So without further ado, at first, we kind of, like we said, we sort of need to know kind of if there's a lot of barriers, it's got to sort of be worth our time, right? So what are kind of the benefits of physical activity, but also kind of what's the aim, what's the guidelines? And so this image here represents the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines for adults in the UK. And before I sort of dive into it, what I will caveat to say is if you're not quite meeting these guidelines just yet, if you're just getting started and you're just trying to sort of be a bit more active, I know sometimes it can feel a bit daunting to sort of look at these and think, oh, I'm not anywhere near this amount. But what I would encourage you to take is that there are tons of benefits, even if we can just do a 10-minute walk or a 10-minute bout of physical activity. We can start to have some of those short-term benefits as well as some long-term overall as we slowly build up and gradually try to aim to reach these guidelines. So the guidelines are broken down into these sort of 4 color parts. The first is the green, which is we want to aim for around 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. That can be sort of basically anything that sort of gets your heart rate up, where you're still able to sort of string together some short sentences and hold a conversation as you're doing the exercise, and whatever that is for you. So whatever you enjoy, that gets the heart rate up. Or you can aim for 75 minutes of vigorous intensity. So when we say vigorous, we means you're still able to breathe. We always want to be breathing when we're exercising, but that we're sort of the conversation's a bit more short, right? You know, we're sort of saying yes and no. We're sort of holding a few words together, but it's not maybe a lengthy conversation. And then the other really important component of the guidelines is sort of in the center, this building strength. So we want to aim to eventually sort of get up to at least 2 days of strength training exercises or resistance training exercises. So that can be sort of weight bearing exercise and using our own body weight as a sort of a resistance. And that can be in movements like yoga or Pilates, things like that. Could be going to the gym and doing, you know, some weight machines or lifting weights, or even just sort of, you know, doing gardening, carrying heavy grocery bags. So anything where we have a bit of weight that's challenging us to sort of to make our muscles respond and get stronger. The other two important components as well is this minimize sedentary time, so minimize our inactivity. So I know we talked about, you know, back-to-back meetings, how active we are. So even if we meet the 150 minutes of moderate activity per week and we're doing our 2 days of strength training, the amount of time we spend sitting per day is a separate risk factor to our health. So we can meet those guidelines, but if we're still sitting for more than sort of 10 hours a day, that's still its own separate risk factor and can increase our risk for certain health conditions. So we want to, the ideal world is we want to sort of get up every half hour. The more realistic guideline is to say at least 5 minutes standing every hour and a half. To take that information and just think, when I go up for the kettle, can I try to make sure I'm kind of moving around a little bit? And then for older adults, we want to try to incorporate 2 days of balance activities as well. So again, I don't want this to sort of be too daunting or too intimidating. If you're just starting out, the important part to remember is that some is better than none. There's never going to be a perfect time, so just going for it is a perfect moment, and that we can start to see some short-term and long-term benefits. So just in the short term, if we are being physically active, whether we're doing strength or flexibility exercises or aerobic exercises, we can start to see these short-term benefits of improving our mood. So we know from research that even just a 10-minute sort of moderate, you know, walk can start to get the heart rate up, and then our concentration improves. So if you have a really sort of complex task that you need to sort of be taking a look at, if you actually sort of do a quick little walk, you know, before you do that task, you might find you have a bit more clarity, a bit more concentration. We also see that we get that improvement. We sort of feel more energized and have more, you know, sort of strength to do the day and tackle the day. It also is great for decreasing stress, anxiety, and fatigue. And there's a really strong connection between being physically active and our sleep quality. So how refreshed do we feel? Are we sort of waking up in the middle of the night? So all these things can help. And also that improves sort of confidence. So we're achieving goals that we're setting within physical activity, and that can boost our self-esteem. But also there are a ton of long-term benefits to being physically active. And I think sometimes when it comes to physical activity, we almost need to think of it like our pension, right? You know, we're sort of playing the long game here to have the quality of life that we want to have. So I used to work with a pharmacist back in the States, and I remember him saying, if you could bottle up all the benefits to physical activity into a pill, you'd be the richest person in the world, because there's so many benefits. So 83% lower risk of osteoarthritis, 40% lower risk of type 2 diabetes, 35% lower risk of heart disease and stroke, 30% lower risk of depression, dementia, early death, and 20% lower risk of colon and breast cancer. In fact, there's sort of 8 cancers in total that physical activity is linked to help sort of be a protective factor to help reduce your risk. And they're bladder, breast, colon, endometrium, esophageal cancer, kidney, lung, and stomach cancers. So again, sometimes we sort of read these out and we think, okay, percentage, yes, impressive. But actually, let's sort of sink that in for a second. If someone said, hey, if you took this pill and you could get a 40% lower risk of type 2 diabetes, would we take it? Possibly, probably. If I said I could just take one pill to reduce my risk for all of these conditions, I'd probably take it. And so that's why sometimes when we have periods of low motivation, if we try to hone in on the reason why we're doing it, we can kind of remind ourselves we're playing the long game here, right? We want to sort of invest the same way we're investing in our pensions. We want to have that quality of life that we want to have later, as well as in the short term. But that's not to say that the sort of barriers that are there in the present and the day-to-day don't exist. I know what people sort of said in the chat, time is a really important one. And this is sort of the element of the webinar where I would really encourage you, if you've experienced some of these barriers before, and sort of if you found a way that sort of overcome them, then please feel free to sort of share what's worked for you in the chat. I think we can all sort of learn from each other here. But just some possible solutions to some of these potential barriers, if I start with time. I think it'd be remiss for me to say where there's a will, there's a way, because I don't think it sort of factors in the different responsibilities that people have on their plate. But what I will say is that we make time for the things we value. And so if we value physical activity, if we hone in on that reason why we're being physically active, then we are more likely to maybe try to squeeze in bouts where we can be active. So maybe that's just sort of reviewing, your responsibilities. What are the priorities, that you want to sort of tackle this sort of season in your life? Can we look at our, working patterns? So is there a way we can try to carve out the same way we schedule meetings in back to back? Can we schedule in, our lunch break, or especially in the winter months, can we try to schedule in a slightly longer lunch break and maybe work a bit earlier or later to accommodate that where possible, so we can sort of go out for a walk while we've got some natural sunlight and get some vitamin D as well. Or if anything, just trying to start small. So I think sometimes we get into a headspace of, right, I'm going to be active, or I'm going to meal prep, and we kind of go from 0 to 100 really quickly. But maybe we know from sort of behavior change research that we're more likely to be successful with a goal if we start small and build gradually. So have a think and reflect on kind of where are your opportunities for activity in the day. Is it before work? Is it during lunch breaks? Or is it after? Can we squeeze in just a 5-minute walk if we're working from home, kind of going up the stairs if you have some, just finding those opportunities within your day and building up gradually. The other thing that we get quite a lot is motivation. So I think, again, in our society, we tend to have this perception that if I have a goal in mind, I'm 100% committed and motivated to it at all times. And that's not really a realistic, expectation, is it? We have fluctuations in our motivation for anything. And so sometimes action has to come before motivation, because if we're constantly waiting to sort of have this peak where we're 100% motivated at something, that might come and go very quickly. And so actually sometimes action has to come before motivation. And then by actually doing the activity itself, it boosts our confidence, we feel accomplished, and that actually increases our motivation to keep going with it. But also what we know from behavior change research is that when we do start small, if we're starting anything new, having accountability is really important until that new hobby or new, habit becomes more ingrained in our routine. So having any sort of accountability, whether that's a walking group amongst your colleagues, or with your family, whether that's joining a sort of structured fitness plan, or joining a hobby group like a walking group or a cycling group, where it kind of keeps you accountable more externally until it becomes more routine. And then also just find things that you enjoy. So switching it up. I know I had one personal training client in the past. I will never forget her, where I asked her in the beginning, what sort of movements do you like? Do you not like? And she said, well, I really want to lose weight, so I go on the treadmill. And by diving a little bit deeper, she said, actually, I hate running. And I said, well, why are you going on the treadmill then? So if we kind of put this perception of physical activity being an obligation rather than things that we enjoy, when the going gets tough, we've got a lot on our plate, the things that we don't enjoy are going to be the first things to go. So actually, if we're switching up our activity and finding the things we enjoy, we're more likely to stick to it. And when it comes to energy, it is a bit of a paradox, but we do have more energy the more regularly active we are. But in the meantime, it's about kind of building around your routines and identifying when do you have the most energy. So if you're a natural kind of morning person, then maybe the evenings aren't the best time for you. Whereas if you're an evening person, trying to do a 5 a.m. workout may not be best for you. So it's thinking about what works within your natural sort of routines in the day as well. And then support. So like we said, having that accountability is really important, but equally having that support when you're starting off something new. So whether that's through your family, friends, or coworkers, or finding a hobby group that you can meet up with can be really helpful. And we've got some resources that we'll share later in the session, where if you want to sort of, join an activity challenge or join a structured fitness plan, that can, you can look into those things. But it's also not trying to combine too much. So if you really value, having some quality time with your friends and family and are struggling with the time element of squeezing everything in, where can we combine the things? So maybe instead of a family movie, weekend, maybe we go for like a family walk where you're still getting that sort of support while doing things that are short on time. The other sort of options we get as well sometimes on this call is sort of the lack of knowledge. So whether you're in a position to look at personal training or look at group fitness, that's great. But we've also highlighted in the next couple of slides a lot of free and low cost resources that you can get support with that have structured sort of beginner programs. In terms of finances, we know kind of with the financial climate that we're in right now, it's about trying to sort of identify what are some free opportunities. So again, we've highlighted some, but also I know we have quite a few different organizations represented today. So it'd just be, important to check within your own organization around, what sort of staff discounts or things are available, or if you're a manager, it can be helpful to sort of go to any nearby leisure centers and say, hey, I've got X number of staff, would you consider a corporate discount? And more often than not, having worked in gyms, I can tell you they're oftentimes very willing to accommodate. The other things to consider, lack of access. So again, some people said, working from home makes it more of a challenge. So if you're looking for maybe something that you can do at home, again, I've got lots of resources in the next couple of slides, or it could be sort of investing in some low cost equipment like some resistance bands or kind of multi-purpose sort of dumbbell sets and things where you can do a range of different activities. And then the final bit is fear. So sometimes fear can hold us back, whether that's, fear of recurring and, having an injury or a recurring injury, fear of just looking silly, fear of failing. And I always kind of encourage you, one, to sort of pace yourself and then build up gradually, because if it's a worry for an injury, then we know if we can do things gradually, it like, sort of reduces our risk. But if it's more that emotional side, that fear of getting things wrong again, or sometimes we've been physically active before in our past, and we kind of find ourselves comparing our kind of former version of ourselves, a former fitness, ability to where we're at now. But what I would encourage you to do is to focus on that why, focus on why you're doing it, and also give yourself permission to retry again, right? Because at some point, if you were previously physically active, you had to start from scratch at some point and build up as well. And when you did that, you must have given yourself permission to just have a go and have a try. So give yourself permission again to just have a go and have a try. Does anyone have any sort of other sort of tips or things that have helped them? Then do feel free to sort of put that in the chat. I know someone's mentioned they've used the Couch to 5K app, which we do have linked to the resources in a moment. And yeah, any other tips that can help would be great. So like I mentioned, I've sort of previously alluded that we've got lots of different resources available to you. And this is sort of where the slide, I've broken it down by sort of 3 categories. So within sort of national resources within the NHS, there's a couple to mention, like the Couch to 5K app, which gives you an app that you can download on your phone, and it gives you a structured running plan. You can choose your coach and all those sorts of things. Also, there's Active 10. So I mentioned if you just check those 10-minute walks in a day, then that's the app that can sort of remind you and give you some motivation and boost when you've accomplished them and had a 5-day streak and so on. But if you're looking for some sort of at-home videos or things that you can follow along to for workouts, then the NHS Fitness Studio is great. It has a range of different videos that you can do, anywhere from 10 to 45 minutes, and you can accompany that with their NHS Strength and Flex. So if you wanted to do the Couch to 5K, it also complements the NHS Strength and Flex fitness plan, which is a 5-week plan. You've also got Everyday Active. So for Kent, if you're a Kent or a Medway resident, your one-stop shop for kind of finding anything physical activity related is going to be the Everyday Active website. So on it, I'll see if I can pull up the website real quick. There we go. So on Everyday Active, you can just select what sort of activities you're into, or if you're looking for limited mobility. So let's say I'm really into walking. If I click on walking, it will then give you some sort of benefits to it, give you some, stories and blogs and, testimonials to give you some inspiration. But if I filter it by activities, I can then find what are some walking trails near me, what are some family-friendly walks, where are my nearby, parks and walking groups and apps and stuff that can help me. So it really is a one-stop shop to kind of help you with those sorts of things. And then if you're a Medway resident, then there are some additional resources that will be included on that website, but just specifically to highlight. They've got the Medway Can Challenge, which is sort of encouraging all Medway residents to log their sort of miles that they do, or if you are doing grip fitness, it converts, what that activity would be in a mile. And it's to sort of show how Medway residents can sort of walk to the moon and whatnot. But they also have a range of different resources there that you can check out. And if you have sort of a health condition and you need a bit more of a structured program with a qualified personal trainer, they do have a program in Medway that's called the Exercise Referral Scheme, where you can get a qualified personal trainer to give you a structured program. There is a cost to it, and it does vary by kind of which leisure center is participating. So the link there gives you more information. If you're looking for more sort of behavior change support, then one you can, if you're a Kent resident, gives you access either in a one-to-one or in a group setting that you can get support with. And then for men, if any men in your life that have a BMI that are over 27.5 or higher and are interested in sort of, reconnecting with sort of football and want to join a league, then there's a scheme called Man versus Fat. I didn't come up with the name, but I'm also not the target audience. But that you can join. That's commissioned by Kent County Council and then for Medway Council as well. Finally, there's just some wider programs I just want to bring your direction to. So our parks it's a private organization, but they partner with local authorities to run free over Zoom live stream workouts. So I know for me, with my motivational levels, I'm much less likely to do a pre-recorded workout. I'm much more likely to stick with it if I kind of know I'm showing up for someone. And so for me, I really like their live Zoom workouts. They range from anywhere from yoga to high intensity interval training. It's all for free. You just sign up, you get a Zoom link sent to you, and then you can attend. They also have what's called their Couch to Fitness program. So if I just pull that up for a second. So again, this was all the live sessions. So I just filtered it by today, and you can see all the upcoming live Zoom workouts that you can do. But they also have, like I said, their pre-recorded structured programs that are beginner friendly. So their Couch to Fitness is their flagship one, where it consists of 3 30-minute pre-workouts that you can complete and follow along the video to, and that's for 9 weeks. But they also have different groups as well. So they got pre and postnatal. They've got 5-minute bite-size programs that you can follow for 9 days. They've got Bhangra, they've got Family Fit, maybe even a Christmas one. So there's lots of structured beginner focus workouts that are sort of pre-recorded that give you that a bit of accountability and support as well. And then again, if you have any other ones that you personally have used them, do feel free to put them in the chat. Some final ones we'll mention, like the Nike Training Club app. So it's an app you can download. It's got over nearly 200 workouts that you can range from flexibility to strength and so on. And then if you have a long-term health condition, then the We Are Undefeatable campaign, they have a website. I'll just pull that one up real quick, where you can sort of get resources of all the ways that you can sort of, be active still despite a health condition. So they have their 5 and 5, a 5-minute workout that you can customize, an activity finder, lots of different sort of videos that you can follow along to that are sort of low intensity and things. So again, lots of sort of resources. So if you felt like your potential barrier was sort of maybe knowledge or that support, then hopefully some of those resources I've highlighted can kind of help you with that. But I also think it's important just to sort of take a moment to kind of appreciate why, as humans, we are the way we are sometimes. So sometimes we know what we need to do, but like we said, it's always a little bit difficult to kind of do it. And it can be helpful sometimes to understand, why we do certain things and we make certain behaviors. And I think that's really sort of conceptualized well with this sort of stages of change model. So it's trying to appreciate why we do things. And if you've ever kind of had a conversation either with a family or friend, or maybe you're a well-being champion and have spoken to your colleagues, and it feels like you're kind of giving them all the solutions in the world, but they're not taking it on board, this might kind of explain why that is. So the first stage of it is that pre-contemplation. This is where someone's not even thinking about being physically active or eating healthily. It's not on their mind, it's not on their radar, they haven't even thought about it. That's where you don't really, if you try to give ideas to them, they're not really ready to take it on board. contemplation stage is sort of when they're starting to think it over. So you've planted some seeds and maybe they're kind of thinking about, oh, is this worth my time? Maybe I might consider it. Preparation is when you actually start kind of researching. Maybe you're buying trainers or you're looking at some of those resources on, the hyperlinks we've shared today. So you're kind of gathering your information to then, decide if you're going to make that decision. And this may be where kind of quite a few people on the call are today, and that's great. What we want to aim for is then we move into that action stage. That's when we actually start doing the behavior. We're doing some physical activity, and that's what we want to aim for, is to eventually get to that maintenance stage. So it becomes from a new hobby or a new habit to it's a part of our kind of routine. It's more ingrained. We have that structure there, and we're able to keep ourselves accountable rather than kind of needing as much support. And that's sort of when we're kind of doing a routine for sort of 6 months or longer. But it's also important that, life happens sometimes, an illness can happen, or a bereavement, or, just anything in life can happen where we start to sort of get off the wagon a little bit and we have those lapses. But the important thing to remember is whether that's currently yourself or if you've had that in the past, is that you can always go back on the wheel. You don't have to start from pre-contemplation. You can jump back on into sort of the action stage or the preparation stage again, and that you can still sort of control kind of where you want to start from again. So with that kind of in mind, when we are starting to go into that action stage or even the preparation stage, there are some tips that we know then that can be really helpful to keep in mind when building these habits. And as I've mentioned previously, it's about starting small. So giving yourself sort of realistic sort of stepping points that we can then springboard off of are more helpful and are found to be more likely to kind of stick with it after we've even reached our goal, compared to if we kind of go from 0 to 100 right away. So building up activity gradually, finding activities that you enjoy, and then finding that support and accountability along the way is really, really helpful. Sometimes as well, when something is brand new, it can be helpful to have a deadline, and that can be through, doing a team activity challenge. So one of the resources on that slide I shared previously gives you the option to create your own bespoke workplace activity challenges for free. So you can make a 4-week activity challenge that you and your team can then run, and it can be steps versus distance, or activity points versus active carbon saved from being active traveling. So lots of different options there if you need that sort of accountability and a bit of friendly competition along the way, or using some of those structured Couch to Fitness programs or the Couch to 5K app, where you've got sort of a structured multi-week plan to give you kind of hold your feet to the fire until it becomes more of a routine. But remembering your why is really important. So going back to those benefits, why is it that, there's lots of sort of barriers, so it needs to be worth it if I'm going to start to do it. So honing in on that during those periods of low motivation can be really helpful. And then if we have any sort of perfectionists in the room, myself included, just remind yourself that there's never going to be a perfect time. So just remember that some is better than none, and that if we're not quite at the activity guidelines yet, we're still going to get some of those benefits. Even at just sort of 10 minutes, we can start to get those benefits and feel, feel good. So having previously worked in sort of behavior change and supporting clients in both one-to-one and group settings, I wanted to share kind of 2 different approaches. So if you have a piece of notebook paper in front of you, or if you want to sort of have a Word document out and follow along and kind of make your own goals, then I encourage you to do so. But this is one of 2 approaches that I'll show you today where we can kind of really set our goals up for success. And the first is just to sort of ask, what is it that you want to achieve? So it might be a bit broader at this stage. It's like, well, I want to be more active. Okay, but now we want to look at being more specific. So have we ever, if we show of hands or thumbs up in the chat, have we kind of seen SMART goals before? Maybe familiar with that sort of term, that specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So it's sort of like that, but it goes a bit further. So this is the column. The second column is where we do like the equivalent to the specific and the measurable and the SMART goals. So we're looking at honing down that I want to be active, and then asking ourselves, what does that look like for me? So for me, it's I want to be active, but I preferably like to do group fitness. I find I do better with sort of kind of seeing other people continue to kind of keep pushing. So that pushes me along. So I'm looking for something that's more group fitness oriented. And I want to sort of aim for sort of 6 to 12 weeks. So 12 weeks maximum is what we recommend for setting a goal and setting a timeline. If it's longer, if you're sort of preparing for a marathon, for example, then break that goal down into multiple 12-week phases then. But it's sort of thinking in that sort of time sphere. What can I do? What kind of works for me? What would that look like, that goal? And get specific. Then we want to have that third column to say, well, why do I care about it? What's my reason why? And I would encourage you in the chat, you can put 1, 2, 3, or 4. Out of these reasons why, which one do you think would be the most powerful reason why? Do you think it's option 1, I'm tired of feeling so sluggish? Option 2, I know I should be more active? Option 3, my family has a history of heart disease and I don't want to go through that. Or option 4, because I want to be thin and weigh X amount. So out of those 1, 2, 3, or 4, put in the chat, which reason why do you think would be the most powerful? So we've got an option 2. Yeah, just coming through. Yes. Oh, yeah. So someone's put in the chat, will we get these slides? Yeah, I'll give you a fillable version of the slides after today's session, so you can fill them in and work in them in your own time. So we've got a couple option 2s, couple option 3s happening in the chat. So I know I should be more, or have a family history, and option 4 even. So, and really the answer is that it's a bit of a trick question. It's going to be unique to you, right? So it's honing in on what your reason why is. But the examples I've given here, I want to sort of show that sometimes when if you sort of chose option 2, this I know I should be, that kind of alludes to this sort of connotation of obligation. I know I should be active. I know I'm supposed to be, be healthy and active and those sorts of things. And obligation can be a really great motivator. We have something, there's a lot of things that we have obligations to do and we do them. And they can be a great motivator for that. But what I would encourage you to dive a little bit deeper on is to ask yourself sort of, when the going gets tough, if we're just doing things out of obligation, then those are the first things that kind of go to the wayside and kind of, they become our lower priorities. So just sort of think about yourself if that can be helpful, but think a little bit more around, is there any other sort of reasons why that you think that come from a place of sort of enjoyment eventually that you think you can, that will relate to you? And then option 4, I think someone's put some option 4. The other thing, while this session isn't focused around weight loss, I know those that may come on this session may be interested in weight loss. So I just want to do a little caveat on that, which is to say, having worked with clients on this, I would just challenge you to think of, if your goal is about weight loss, then is it about weighing a particular weight? And to ask yourself, do you think you'll be happy when you weigh this certain weight on the scale, or do you think you'll be happy if you are doing these behaviors? And just to sort of kind of differentiate a little bit, because sometimes within weight loss goals we can get really honed in on a number, but actually the journey of getting to that number, the behaviors we do to get to that number are the things we want to maintain. So just have a think about that if that does relate to you. But as always, it's going to be personal to you, what your reason why, but honing it in for you is what I would hope for you to do in this session. And then the final bit is this, we kind of go beyond SMART goal setting and we look at sort of that relapse prevention side of things. So we want to try to anticipate, what are my potential challenges that I'm going to face here? So what do I have in the next 12 weeks that might put a caveat into things, might sort of put me off course? That could be, well, I know it's going to be wintertime, it's going to be cold, I'm probably going to have less motivation, or I'm finding it hard to sort of balance, family and work obligations. So it's just trying to anticipate in the next sort of 12 weeks or whatever your goal is that you've established in column 2, what might you anticipate? What might come up in that time? Is it a really busy work period for you? Do you have, lots of family obligations in that time? Anticipate it now, so that way in the next column we can then think about possible solutions to that barrier before it kind of gives us a curveball. So maybe, if we're using the example of lack of motivation and family work-life obligations, maybe that's thinking of, can I schedule a class that is live so I feel more obligated to begin with to sort of, get started and build that habit? But then longer term, is it maybe looking at how I share my family work-life, responsibilities? So maybe I speak with my partner to share dinner responsibilities twice a week so I can do that live workout class in the evening and so on. Or can I adjust my working hours slightly so I take a slightly longer lunch so I'm doing a workout session during my lunch break and so on. So it's thinking about possible solutions that would work for you then. And then finally, we want to look at what accountability is going to help me. Because again, when something's brand new, when we're trying to do a new habit or a new goal, we often need that support and accountability until it becomes more ingrained. So who's going to be able to sort of keep me accountable, whether that's a friend or a coworker or a family member, or whether that's using a structured, activity challenge or a fitness, structured week plan. And then your final bit is, how will I know I've achieved it? And this is where it can be really helpful to have sort of number-based goals, number-based outcomes. Like I want to be able to complete, if this is a 9-week structured fitness plan, then I want to complete 75% of those, workouts in that 9-week plan or something like that. But there's also sort of subjective things that can be just as valuable to measure as well. And that can be things like, I have less back pain, I have less joint pain, I feel more energized, I feel like I can keep up with my kids, so there's those sorts of things that are just as valuable to kind of acknowledge when we're trying to celebrate our successes. And if we don't quite meet it, then we can still learn from that experience and use that knowledge to then help us in future goals as well. But hopefully that gives you a bit of a structure to kind of anticipate any sort of challenges you might have so you can set yourself up for success. And then you will get a copy of the slide deck, and it will have a fillable version on this slide. So then you can type in your goals and work through it in your own time. But I know, that sort of example number one kind of works for me. I'm quite a linear. I love a to-do list. I love a checklist. But also for those that are maybe a bit more abstract or a bit more creative, then another way to sort of look at those example number one is to focus in on this other approach called the why, how, what, or the golden circle. So if we already had our goal in mind of I want to run a 5K in 12 weeks time, then we would want to ask ourselves these 3 main questions, which is, why do I have this goal? So we're always trying to hone back in, why am I doing this? I have other things I could do with my time, so why is it important to me? And maybe that's, I'm tired of feeling lethargic. I know my mental health improves when I feel active, whatever it is for you. Then I'm going to ask myself, how can I achieve this goal? And this is where you're literally just spitballing. So we're not trying to judge which is going to be the best option yet. We'll do that later. But for now, we're just getting it all out. We're kind of writing it within the circle, any and every idea that we have of how we could go about doing this goal. So I've got quite a few different examples here. And then I'm just putting them all out there. So maybe it's the Couch to 5K app. Maybe it's joining a local run club. Maybe it's participating in the Sunday park runs at my nearby park. Whatever it is, I'm just spitting it out and putting it on in that sort of second circle for now. And I'll come back to it and then circle which one I think is going to be, the one I'm going to do. And then we're finally going to ask, what will you have to do to achieve this goal? So this is where we start to dive into what are the kind of practical or logistical things that it might come up in order to do the thing. So maybe that's, I need to commit to kind of fitting in runs during my personal time and kind of choosing to prioritize doing these runs. Maybe it's trying to agree the logistics of childcare cover, or maybe it's that sort of, I need to purchase trainers because my old ones are sort of beyond repair. So we're kind of getting those practical elements involved in that final question. So that brings us to sort of the end of today's session. And just as a wrap up, it's reminding ourselves that physical activity can have a lot of short-term and long-term benefits, which may contribute to our kind of reason why we want to do them. But equally, those benefits can help both our physical and our mental health. And the other important thing to keep in mind is that it's important to be aware of some potential barriers and also think about how we can set our goals up then to be realistic and meaningful to ourselves. And then using sort of the slide deck here to hopefully have shared quite a few different resources that you'll find useful or services in your area that both locally or some of those national resources that we've shared today that can help you with your physical activity goals. So as we get towards the end, I've just put in the chat the link to our satisfaction survey. It'd be really, really helpful if you could fill out the survey. It'll just take 2 minutes. It's completely anonymous, but just if you can click on that link, the first link within the chat, and just sort of share any sort of feedback that you have, that would be great. But also, if you're happy to share, what's one thing that you felt like you could take away from today's session that can help you be more active? So maybe that's a potential resource you're going to look at afterwards, or maybe it was just one of the goal setting examples we've done. But if you're happy to share, I'd love to sort of see in the chat what's something that you're going to take away from today's session. I'll leave it up on this final slide here, which just if you wanted to scan the QR code and complete the survey on your phone, you can, or if you want to check out our other upcoming webinars. So on February 9th and February 21st, we have our 45-minute webinar on resiliency and stress. And then in March, we've got another one on March 9th and 14th, in line with Nutrition and Hydration Week, around eating well for less. But thank you so much for kind of the comments that are coming in. I'm glad you found it useful. Yeah, so after, probably by end of day today, I'll share the link to this recording from today's session, and you'll also get a slide deck of today's presentation that will have a fillable section, and so you can kind of complete the goal setting template if you want. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now, and then if you do have any questions, I will take them now.